Some prisons are designed to correct behavior, others are designed to erase it. In the United States, certain prisons operate beyond the public imagination, facilities where sentencing doesn't simply remove freedom, but systematically dismantles identity, perception of time, and connection to reality itself. This is not about overcrowding or tough guards. This is about environments engineered to break the human mind. From the moment a sentence is handed down, the destination matters more than the length of time, because in some American prisons, the punishment begins long before a cell door ever closes, and it continues even after release becomes technically possible. These are the worst prisons to be sentenced into. Facilities where silence is enforced, movement is restricted to minutes per day, and human contact is treated as a security threat. Places where people exist in concrete boxes for years, sometimes decades, with no meaningful interaction, no sunlight, and no certainty that the outside world still exists. These prisons are legal, they are funded, and they are operating right now. At the center of this system is a concept that reshaped American incarceration: permanent isolation. Solitary confinement was once intended as a short-term control measure, but over time, it evolved into a long-term housing strategy, one that removes individuals from society not just physically, but psychologically. In the most extreme facilities, isolation is not a punishment layered on top of a sentence. It is the sentence. Prisoners are confined alone for 22 to 24 hours a day. Meals are passed through slots in steel doors. Recreation, if permitted at all, takes place in small outdoor cages where the sky is visible but unreachable. The human brain is not designed for this. Neurologists and psychologists have repeatedly warned that prolonged isolation produces measurable cognitive decline, memory loss, hallucinations, paranoia, notional flattening, in some cases, complete psychological collapse. And yet, in certain American prisons, isolation is not measured in days or weeks, it is measured in years. Supermax prisons represent the most extreme expression of this philosophy, built to contain those deemed the worst of the worst. These facilities prioritize total control above all else. Every movement is monitored, every sound is suppressed, every routine is designed to minimize human unpredictability. Cells are typically made of poured concrete, sealed and sound dampened. Windows are narrow, often angled to prevent a view of the outside world. Lights may remain on around the clock. There is no natural sense of time, without environmental cues: sunrise, sunset. Social interaction: the brain begins to lose its internal rhythm. Days blur together, weeks feel indistinguishable from months. Some prisoners begin marking time by meals, others stop marking time at all. Communication is limited or non-existent. Conversations with guards are brief and functional. Interaction with other prisoners is usually prohibited. Even medical or legal consultations may occur through glass barriers or metal screens. Over time, the absence of normal human feedback alters behavior. People begin talking to themselves. Some develop intense anxiety or panic attacks. Others experience sensory distortions, hearing voices, seeing movement that isn't there. These effects are not rare. They are expected. Internal reports and independent studies have repeatedly shown that long-term isolation significantly increases the risk of self-harm and suicide. And yet, prisoners suffering these symptoms are often classified as further security risks, resulting in even more restrictive conditions. The system reinforces itself. What makes these prisons especially severe is not just the conditions, but the uncertainty. And like a fixed-term sentence in a standard facility, placement in extreme isolation is often indefinite. There is no clear release date from the conditions themselves. Progression out of isolation may depend on behavior assessments that are subjective, inconsistent, or influenced by the very psychological deterioration isolation causes. A prisoner experiencing anxiety, emotional instability, or difficulty following complex instructions may be deemed non-compliant and therefore unfit for reduced restrictions. The environment creates the behavior. The behavior justifies the environment. For those sentenced directly into these facilities, the impact is immediate. Orientation periods are minimal. Personal belongings are limited. Social structures vanish overnight. Family contact becomes sporadic or impossible. Phone calls, when allowed, are monitored and brief. Visits may occur behind thick glass, if at all. Over time, relationships decay. Outside lives continue without them. Children grow up. Parents age. The world moves forward. Inside the facility, nothing changes. In some of the worst prisons, even educational or rehabilitative programs are unavailable. There are no group activities, no shared meals, no opportunities to demonstrate growth in a social context. Rehabilitation is discussed in policy, but in practice, containment is the goal. These environments do not prepare individuals to re-enter society. They prepare them to survive confinement, and survival often comes at a cost. Former prisoners who spent years in extreme isolation report long-term effects that persist well after release: difficulty interacting with others, heightened startle responses, chronic insomnia, and an overwhelming sense of detachment from reality. For some, reintegration proves impossible. They are released physically but remain confined psychologically. The existence of these prisons raises a critical question. What does a sentence truly mean? Is it a measure of time, or a condition of existence? In the worst American prisons, sentencing is not about duration. It is about placement, and once placed, escape is not guaranteed even if the sentence ends. This chapter only begins to reveal how these facilities operate. Because beyond isolation lies something even more severe: environments where punishment is layered, oversight is minimal, and survival depends on enduring systems that were never designed to heal. And those prisons are still operating. Beyond isolation, America's worst prisons rely on something equally destructive: total environmental control. In these facilities, every element of daily life is regulated: not just movement and communication, but temperature, light, sound, and access to basic necessities. The goal is not discipline. The goal is dependency. Prisoners do not decide when they sleep. They do not control when lights turn on or off. They do not choose when they eat, shower, or step outside. Even bodily autonomy is restricted. Cells in the most severe prisons are designed to remove decision-making entirely. Doors are electronically controlled. Water flow may be timed. Some facilities regulate toilet use through mechanical systems designed to prevent misuse, but which also limit basic human comfort. The environment is not neutral. It is adversarial. Lighting is one of the most powerful tools used. In some units, lights remain illuminated 24 hours a day. In others, darkness arrives without warning. The inconsistency prevents the body from establishing normal sleep cycles. Sleep deprivation becomes routine. Medical studies have shown that chronic disruption of sleep contributes to memory loss, weakened immune response, emotional instability, and impaired judgment. In prison settings, these symptoms are often misinterpreted as behavioral problems, which leads to punishment, which leads to further restriction. Temperature is another factor rarely discussed publicly. Some high-security prisons maintain unusually cold conditions, especially in isolation units. Prisoners report sleeping fully clothed, using limited bedding, or attempting to block air vents to stay warm. Complaints are typically dismissed as exaggerations, but internal audits and lawsuits have repeatedly confirmed that extreme temperature exposure is not accidental. It is structural. Sound, or the absence of it, also plays a role. In isolation units, silence can stretch for hours or days, broken only by mechanical noises, doors locking, ventilation systems cycling, distant echoes of metal against concrete. The brain fills the void. In other facilities, noise is constant. Loudspeaker announcements, alarms, and mechanical systems operate without pause. This unpredictability prevents mental rest and reinforces a sense of powerlessness. Together, these elements form an environment that overwhelms the nervous system. Another defining feature of the worst prisons is restricted access to medical care. While healthcare is legally required, its delivery in extreme facilities is often delayed, minimized, or filtered through security priorities. Appointments may take weeks or months. Requests can be denied without explanation. Mental health care is frequently reduced to brief check-ins through cell doors. In isolation units, Therapy sessions, if they occur at all, are often conducted with the prisoner restrained or separated by barriers. This eliminates confidentiality and undermines trust. Mental illness becomes both widespread and untreated. Conditions such as depression, anxiety disorders, and psychosis are not uncommon in extreme confinement, yet symptoms are often documented as compliance issues rather than health concerns. Self-harm is treated as a security violation. Instead of intervention, prisoners may be placed on suicide watch, an even more restrictive form of isolation involving constant lighting, removal of personal items, and continuous monitoring. The experience can be traumatizing. Once the watch ends, individuals are often returned to the same conditions that caused the crisis. Medical neglect is not limited to mental health. Chronic illnesses such as diabetes, heart disease, and respiratory conditions are common among prison populations, yet treatment is inconsistent. Missed medications, delayed diagnoses, limited access to specialists, and extreme facilities. Security protocols frequently override medical recommendations. Movement restrictions make transporting prisoners to outside hospitals difficult, so treatment is postponed or denied. Deaths that occur under these conditions are often classified as natural causes. The paperwork is completed. The facility continues operating. Oversight is minimal. Many of the worst prisons are located in remote areas, far from urban centers and media scrutiny. Access by journalists is tightly controlled. Public information is filtered through official statements. Independent monitoring, when it exists, is limited in scope. Complaints filed by prisoners are reviewed internally. Grievance systems are complex, slow, and rarely result in meaningful change. Retaliation such as increased restrictions or loss of privileges is a common fear. As a result, conditions remain largely invisible. Legal challenges do occur, but they move slowly. By the time cases are heard, years may have passed. Plaintiffs may have been transferred, released, or deceased. Systemic issues persist. Another defining aspect of these prisons is the erosion of legal access. While prisoners retain the right to consult attorneys, logistical barriers often make this difficult. Legal visits may require advanced scheduling, security clearance, and compliance with strict protocols. Phone calls are expensive and time-limited. Legal materials are restricted. In isolation units, access to law libraries may be non-existent. Without consistent legal support, appeals stagnate, deadlines are missed, cases quietly expire. The sentence becomes functionally permanent for those serving long or indeterminate terms. Hope becomes abstract. Parole hearings, if available, are rare and brief. Decisions are often based on behavior reports generated within the very environments that produce instability. A prisoner struggling under extreme conditions may appear non-compliant or uncooperative on paper. Context is ignored. This creates a closed loop where release becomes increasingly unlikely the longer someone remains inside. The prison does not prepare individuals for society. It prepares them to remain. Over time, identity erodes. Without social roles, personal agency, or future orientation, people begin to see themselves solely through institutional labels: inmate, risk, file number. This psychological narrowing is one of the most lasting effects of extreme incarceration. Even when individuals are eventually transferred or released, the transition is abrupt. There is little preparation, minimal counseling, limited support. The outside world feels overwhelming. Crowds trigger anxiety. Silence feels unnatural. Choice becomes stressful. Some return to custody not because they are dangerous but because they cannot adapt. Recidivism. Statistics rarely capture this nuance. They measure outcomes, not causes. The existence of these prisons raises uncomfortable questions about the purpose of punishment. Is it deterrence, retribution, public safety, or something else entirely? Because in the worst prisons to be sentenced into, suffering is not incidental, it is operational, and beyond these conditions lies the final layer where sentences are designed not only to confine, but to wait for death, for collapse, for disappearance. That is where this story goes next. At the deepest level of America's harshest prisons lies a reality rarely acknowledged. Some sentences are designed without an end, not because the law demands it, but because the system allows it. In these facilities, time loses its traditional meaning. Sentences stretch beyond calendars and court documents, turning into conditions that persist regardless of behavior, age, or health. Release dates exist on paper, but the damage inflicted inside does not expire. For many, the sentence continues long after the gate opens. One of the most severe consequences of extreme incarceration is institutional dependency, when every decision has been removed, when movement, speech, and even thought are regulated. Personal agency erodes. Over time, the ability to function independently weakens. Choice becomes unfamiliar. Responsibility becomes overwhelming. This is not a failure of character. It is a predictable outcome of prolonged control. Psychologists describe this as learned helplessness, a state in which individuals stop attempting to change their circumstances because past efforts produce no results. In the worst prisons, this condition is reinforced daily. Rules change without notice. Privileges are revoked without explanation. Compliance does not guarantee relief. Eventually, effort feels pointless for prisoners serving long or life sentences. This reality is compounded by aging. Extreme facilities were never designed to accommodate elderly populations, yet people grow old inside them. Mobility declines. Chronic illness increases. Cognitive impairment becomes common. Cells remain the same size. Conditions remain the same severity. Medical care struggles to adapt. Facilities built around security are ill-equipped to provide long-term elder care. Wheelchairs may be unavailable. Specialized treatment is delayed or denied. Compassionate release programs exist, but they are rarely granted. As bodies weaken, isolation deepens. In some cases, individuals deemed too ill to pose a threat remain under the same restrictions as those considered highly dangerous. The classification system does not adjust for frailty. The sentence does not soften with age. Death inside these prisons is often quiet. When it occurs, it is processed administratively. Reports are filed. Next of kin may be notified. The institution continues operating. Public awareness is minimal. Deaths attributed to natural causes rarely spark investigation, even when they occur under conditions of prolonged neglect or extreme confinement. Accountability is difficult to establish when oversight is limited and transparency is restricted. The system protects itself. Even when reforms are proposed, change moves slowly. Court rulings may limit certain practices, but implementation varies by state and facility. Policies shift. Terminology changes. The structures remain. Isolation units are renamed. Conditions are reclassified. Numbers are adjusted, but the lived experience often stays the same. One of the most disturbing aspects of these prisons is how normalized they have become. Extreme confinement is discussed in abstract terms: security levels, management strategies, risk assessments rather than human consequences. Language creates distance. When suffering is described clinically, it becomes easier to justify. When people are reduced to classifications, their experiences become data points rather than realities. This detachment allows the system to operate with minimal resistance. Public opinion plays a role. Fear-driven narratives about crime reinforce support for harsh punishment. The concept of the worst creates moral separation, making extreme treatment seem acceptable. Distance makes indifference possible. Most Americans will never see inside of these prisons. They exist far from population centers, hidden behind layers of security and bureaucracy, out of sight, out of mind. Until a case reaches the news, until a lawsuit breaks through, until a report briefly captures attention, then fades. The question is not whether these prisons are effective, it is whether they are necessary. Research consistently shows that extreme confinement does not reduce violence long-term. It does not rehabilitate. It does not prepare individuals for release. In many cases, it increases the likelihood of future harm both inside and outside prison walls. Yet the model persists, because dismantling it would require confronting uncomfortable truths about punishment, responsibility, and the limits of control. It would require acknowledging that some sentences inflict damage beyond what any court formally ordered in the worst prisons to be sentenced into. The punishment is not only confinement, it is disappearance. People vanish into systems designed to contain rather than correct, to manage rather than heal. Their stories are rarely told, their experiences rarely documented. And when they do reemerge through release, transfer, or death, they often do so changed in ways that cannot be undone. The impact extends beyond prison walls. Families carry the weight. Communities absorb the consequences. Systems cycle individuals back through institutions unequipped to address the harm already done. The sentence does not stay contained as long as these prisons exist. The question remains unresolved: what is justice meant to accomplish? If punishment destroys the capacity to rejoin society, what purpose does it serve? If confinement becomes an end in itself, who does it protect? In America's worst prisons, sentencing is not just a legal decision, it is a transformation, and once that transformation begins, there is no guarantee it can ever be reversed. These prisons continue to operate, the system continues to function, and sentences continue to be handed down. The destination still matters more than the time.